Hello, everyone. I am back for the second year of what I guess is now a series of me ranking and talking about all of the movies nominated for Best Picture at this year's Oscars. Can you believe it's already been a year since that last one? Isn't it just absolutely horrifying? But anyway, I'm actually pretty excited to talk about these. I think 2023 as a year definitely was weaker overall than 2022, but there are still a bunch of really great movies this year, a lot of cool genre stuff, a couple great TV shows, which I typically do not stoop to watching, so that was kind of exciting. In this video, we're only going to talk about Oscar nominees, but if you want to see me talk about all of those other movies I just flashed up on the screen, you can go over to my new Patreon. I feel like I'm on QVC right now, but yes, I'm starting a Patreon. I'll say up front that everything's staying exactly the same on this channel. I'm going to continue making my videos as normal. I'm actually really excited about the one I've started working on recently, but I wanted to have an extra place to talk about some of the movies I'm interested in without having the pressure and pretense of editing and scripting and having it be fully public and all of that. Especially because I'm interested in a lot of things that aren't tied to the Oscars at all. And I love curating combinations of movies or directors or stars to talk about. So I figured that could all go in a separate place for all the people who feel so inclined and want to hear me talk. So there will be a few tiers, and I'll post one extra long-form talk over there per month about whatever topic I choose. It'll be more conversational, a little more informal, kind of like what I'm doing right now. There will be a link below to all of that if you want to take a look, or if you want to hear me talk about any of these 2023 movies, but back to what we're talking about here. So we're going to do this just like last year's, where I'm going to go from 10 to 1. As a disclaimer, again, although I love a good ranking, at the same time, none of this is set in stone at all. Don't get too hung up on what's coming after what. Just know that if it's towards the bottom of the list, I feel more negatively about it, and if it's towards the top of the list, I feel positively about it, and that's really all that matters. So at the bottom of the list, we have American Fiction. My biggest issue with this movie is on a pure aesthetic level. It feels way too much like some ugly Hulu streaming show. There's no sense of shot composition or imagery or any sort of a cinematic sensory element. It's definitely a good ensemble cast. I love Tracee Ellis Ross, Jeffrey Wright, his girlfriend was very good too, but ultimately the whole thing is completely incoherent to me. I get the idea of putting the protagonist's family through a typical, like, mumblecore prestige melodrama and contrasting that on a meta level with the sort of stuff that Issa Rae's character and Jeffrey Wright's character are writing. But the satire and the melodrama never come together, and I don't think even the movie itself knows what it's trying to say by the end. It's just tiresome because the critics and journalists and Hollywood types that'll champion this movie are the exact same people who 5 years ago would have been also championing the cynical, identity-based art this movie is satirizing in the first place. So this is just the industry self-flagellating and going in a circle. There are definitely some funny moments, especially those literary award committee scenes. I think those are great. But other than that, the satire isn't even that sharp to me, and the vision just isn't clear enough. Number 9 is Barbie. I'll start with the positives here. So there's a great movie stuffed in here somewhere, and it's all centered around that one scene of Barbie when she first enters the real world and she starts experiencing the sublimity of all human emotion, and she starts crying, and that scene is genuinely one of the most like bracing and human moments I've seen in a popular blockbuster in so long. If the movie was all like that, it would be fantastic. But unfortunately, Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach keep undercutting themselves because anytime there is a great human moment, they want to swerve the movie back to this like half-baked, botched gender commentary they're trying to do, which is never interesting and feels like a collage of 2012 BuzzFeed article titles. I also really don't respond to this genre of millennial internet humor. Just take the concept of Ryan Gosling playing Ken and singing I'm Just Ken. Whatever that is, it's the polar opposite of what I find funny. So that's on me, but I just couldn't take it. I'm almost tempted to put it a little bit higher just because the few scenes of real emotion were genuinely great, but as a package, I don't think it's a well constructed movie. I think when the dust settles on the cultural moment of it all, people are going to look back and be like, what was going on with that plot? It's so all over the place. But I guess it's a cute monoculture throwback thing. It is what it is. For number 8, we have Past Lives. Here's another movie where I have some bones to pick. I'm looking at this list, and the next few movies I have in a row here, you people are just not going to like me, so just buckle in because it's not going to get any better. This movie is kind of middling Sundance stuff to me. Everything good I have to say about it stems from Greta Lee, who gives a fantastic performance. She's very natural, very watchable, a lot of good nonverbal, wordless moments that I think are very effective. But the amount of times I have heard this movie billed as subtle or coming from a like deft directorial vision or something like that, people saying that they can't believe this is a first feature. I'm like, what are people talking about? This is a movie that opens on a shot of our protagonists in a bar and voiceover saying, "Oh, I wonder what those people are up to. I wonder what they're thinking. What's their story?" It's like, okay, are you kidding me? This is also a movie where a couple are lying in bed and the boyfriend's like, "You talk to me in English, but then when you dream, you talk in Korean in your sleep." It's almost like you're stuck between two worlds or something. So, like, I don't think any of this movie is dealing in subtleties. If you're looking for something along these lines that is subtle and impressionistic, watch News from Home, maybe. But this, like I said, feels very firmly planted in standard Sundance territory, which is to say it's fine, but the outsized praise has baffled me. My number 7 is Killers of the Flower Moon. My main issue with this movie is the ending, which was completely insufferable to me. It feels so inorganic, like something Scorsese is only doing because of the modern moment he finds himself in, and that makes it feel completely out of place with the rest of the movie's style. I get very sick of this postmodern attitude in movies where we have to stop and make sure the viewer understands that everyone is complicit in history and the audience is complicit and the director is complicit. I just think it's very didactic, and even though on the surface I guess it seems like a really out of the box way to end things, it's in reality a very unimaginative way to go about things, in my opinion. But the movie does have a lot of good going for it. I love the swooping, sprawling nature of the whole thing, the way it gives all the characters room to breathe. I'm always down for a good long movie, and I do love that it's clearly visually inspired by those big 50s and 60s neo-westerns like Giant or HUD. I think Leo is great, and I do think Lily Gladstone gives a fantastic performance as well. Just like Greta Lee, who I was talking about, it's another one of these performances which are primarily nonverbal and all in the eyes. So I do enjoy taking in the world. It just feels split between the two stories it wants to tell, right? Like the one of the natives and the one of Leo's family. I never feel like we dug deep enough into either. So a lot of the characters play as pretty surface level, and the ending doesn't help things. Number 6, we have Anatomy of a Fall. I'm pretty on the fence with this one. There's this general tone I associate with these new, arty, European can crossover hits that always feature some glossy, snappy story, and I don't know, they always feel too studied to me. Like, well scripted, well constructed, even fun to watch, but I don't feel that this movie actually has much to say about the nature of truth or guilt, those themes that just feel rubber stamped onto the movie. Like, in theory, it's about those things, and you can name check them in a review, but I don't find its conclusions that clear or that compelling. But again, to go into the positives, the performances are all great. I love that lawyer guy, Swan Arlott or something. Sandra Huller is good as well. I think she's actually better in the other movie on this list, but we'll get to that. I just got to the end and I was like, okay, sure. I think it's cool to explore culpability and narcissism in this way. And I think the final shot is great, but it didn't ever reach full profundity or the full wow moment for me. So that's why it's kind of smack in the middle of the list. For number 5, I put The Holdovers. I'm surprised it's this low, actually. It feels almost wrong to see it in the middle of this list because I had such a good time with it. It's rightfully gotten a lot of praise for being a somewhat straightforward movie that ultimately feels greater than the sum of its parts, just because it captures such a comforting and warm mood. The 3 performances are obviously good. Divine is great. In my mind, she's about to win this Oscar for both this movie and her work in The Idol. Then Dominic Sessa is so naturally charismatic. If you just styled him a bit differently, he genuinely feels like someone who's plucked out of one of those really grimy 70s movies like Female Trouble or Last House on the Left or something. I love his look, really interesting. I will say I didn't need the last 15 minutes of this movie. It starts creeping up to the line of saccharine that I'm able to tolerate. The movie is pretty knowingly dealing in that sort of emotion throughout, but it just gets a little much towards the end, a little too Good Will Hunting. But what I really take from this is just the warm tones and all the cozy, empty settings. I'm very drawn to it. It just feels so nostalgic. At number 4, I put Oppenheimer. The main thing I really love about this movie is the way that it situates the atomic bomb, not even necessarily as this moral binary, like good or bad thing, or necessary or unnecessary thing, but focuses more on the fact that it's really a civilizational endpoint of sorts. I thought it was striking that the first couple acts feel so focused on this great man theory of Oppenheimer as this one person charging forward with human ingenuity, irrespective of the morality of it all. He's this one scientist who's changing the world, only he can do this. And then in the third act, after the bomb is dropped, the whole movie sort of bleeds out into this very diffuse bureaucratic network of lawyers and closed door meetings and depositions and weird Senate chamber stuff. And I think that was a conscious choice. It's almost like that sort of event, which pierces so far beyond what humanity thought was possible, prompts a recoil effect, which is this great civilizational gridlock. And obviously, as someone who prioritizes image and sound and mood, I thought the bomb sequence itself, like the Trinity test, was incredible. I love the score. I love that swirling bomb imagery that they use throughout. All that sort of stuff is very evocative. So I think it's really good. It'll certainly be the best picture winner we've gotten in a minute, maybe since Spotlight, or I guess maybe Parasite, one of those two. But either way, it's been a little while since I've really enjoyed one like this. For number 3, we have Maestro. I just saw this one a couple weeks ago. It was the last nominee I got around to because it's been ridiculed on social media, so I figured it would be another musical biopic, and I was like, okay, I don't care, but this is why you can never, ever, ever, ever listen to the Twitter peanut gallery, because everyone is clueless, and this movie is fantastic and so much more twisted and sophisticated than people are giving it credit for. First of all, Bradley Cooper should absolutely be winning Best Actor for this. I don't understand why people are making fun of his performance. The prosthetic stuff is a whole separate thing, but even just in his physicality, the way he carries himself, his mannerisms, I've never seen this sort of performance from him where he's playing a person who feels the need to always be the biggest character in the room. You feel so much of his simultaneous narcissism and insecurity. I buy every moment of him, from the 40s when the movie begins all the way through to the late 80s, I think, where we end the whole thing. I find every iteration of this character fascinating. More broadly, this is an incredibly personal and magnified look at genius and creativity, and specifically the archetype of homosexual genius, and the way that tortured sexuality and gender ambiguity puts you on the fringes of human experience in certain ways, which can often result in artistic greatness and obsession. And then there's Carey Mulligan, who I was equally blown away by. That monologue she gives while she's eating lunch, I know it's like a very Oscar baity scene, but right there you get so much about her character, and the fact that this is far from just a story about the put-upon wife who's in the shadow of her husband. At one point in the monologue, she refers to him as my little boy, or my darling child, or something like that, and right there you glean that even though she's the one being cheated on and pushed aside and all that, she also clearly equally holds some kind of maternal psychological domination in the dynamic. And then, of course, you get to that big cathedral scene, which people are also saying is like a superfluous Oscar moment. I mean, the stuff about Cooper saying that it took him 7 years to prepare for this or whatever, I don't really care about that. But the scene itself is an incredible way to visualize the ecstasy of human artistic creation. I mean, it was like actually breathtaking. And then there's that one modern scene at the very end where he's dancing as a very old man in that club in the 80s, and it's all red lighting. And I thought that was a really uncanny, fraught, pretty bizarre moment, which also really affected me. There's a sense of desperation there, but also catharsis in some way. So I'm really taken by this. I'm certainly going to rewatch it. I love the costume design. I love the period detail, all the directorial flourishes. So I'm very disappointed with the tarring and feathering that's happened here from a mob of people who I think clearly didn't understand it. My second best picture nominee is The Zone of Interest. For how high up this one is, I still kind of feel of two minds about it, which is pretty strange. I love this detached surveillance style of filmmaking, and I think this is an engaging premise, and I'm really impressed with it. But while I'm watching, there's also a little voice in the back of my head thinking that all of it is a little self-satisfied, a little film school, a little too overworked, too obvious with the symbolism. I think the movie's actual strength, the thing that makes it really unique, is the way it spends its time on the psyches of these Nazis and the way they look at the world and the way they conceive of this utopia in their heads and what that utopia really entails. The real centerpiece is the argument between Sandra Hüller and her husband, where she's essentially having a temper tantrum about how she doesn't want to leave this nice estate and she's entitled to her Lebensraum. And that moment makes you almost recontextualize the whole Nazi project, which we typically think of in terms of all the iconography and imposing architecture and ominous propaganda videos, as something almost shockingly childish. And I don't think I've ever seen a movie present it quite in that way. And then I think this all comes full circle in the end with that incredible image of the commandant in that dark hallway staring at us through some wormhole of time and space. And you see this man who suddenly looks so small and almost pathetic, who supposedly thinks he's on the cutting edge of Western civilization or something, having a moment where he's potentially being confronted with a sudden clarity and terror at all of the folly and inhumanity of everything that's being done. It just makes you think about cycles of history in a different way. And that shot just keeps coming back to me, which means the movie's doing its job. And now we've reached my favorite Best Picture nominee, which is Poor Things. So this one really surprised me because it's so rare that I watch a modern movie where I'm constantly awed and thrilled by like aesthetic references that aren't obvious and genuine originality. Like the score for this movie is insane. The storytelling through costume design, the production design. I mean, it's Gaudi, it's Dr. Seuss, it's Universal monster movies, it's 30s comedies, it's giant LED screens as backgrounds, and steampunk cruise ships, and Hannah Shigella as a beguiling communist layabout sailing around Europe. It's just so funny and so wrapped up in the artifice of a movie, and I just love it. I see the movie a lot less as a straightforward empowerment story, although there is a lot of like self-actualization going on here. I read it as much more satirical and barbed in the way it looks at the entirety of 20th century feminism and I guess the concept of progressivism more broadly. And Emma Stone is so fantastic in this. Between this and The Curse, which you go to my Patreon if you want to hear me talk about The Curse, she's holding down the fort apparently with all of this like provocative, transgressive stuff that most actresses would be way too scared to touch. So I guess the bottom line is really that this had the most movie magic to me out of anything that I saw, and that's why it's number one. Like, it's packed with stuff we really aren't seeing anymore, and I'm excited it's all wrapped up in this completely go for broke package. And yeah, that's everything I have. If you're still watching, thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. I feel like I took a little bit more of a rambly, unscripted approach to this. I guess let me know in a nice way, please, if you liked this or not. But regardless, I am officially working on my next big Oscar video. It'll be, a while before that comes out, full disclosure. In the meantime, you can go to my Patreon if you care to hear me talk more this month and the month after that and the month after that and the month after that. But anyway, I will talk to you guys later. Have a great day.
So you was handsome over there. White teeth and hard cock.
Duncan Wedderburn. His teeth are also hard. His penis is also white.
Good lay, I hope.